Hello and welcome to the night before news for Physics Paper 1. Again, it's really important that when you sit in the exam hall, you make sure that you have the correct paper in front of you. So if you are in set 2, 3 or 4, you need the Combined Science Trilogy Foundation tier. If you are in set 1, you need the Combined Science Trilogy Higher tier. And if you are Triple Science, you need the Physics Paper Higher tier.
On all the papers there are a range of questions, from multiple choice tick box answers to fill in the blanks where blanks have been left in sentences for you to fill in, to short answer questions worth 2 to 3 marks, long answer questions which will either be 4 to 6 marks. Then you've got data and graph interpretation, and in one or more of your papers you will be asked to plot a graph. You'll also be asked to carry out calculations that are specific to that exam paper, and then you'll also be asked to carry out a percentage of maths on that exam paper.
Again, they might ask you long answer questions or short answer questions in Physics Paper 1. But this time, some of the short answer questions not only will focus on scientific knowledge and recall, they'll also expect you to be able to use equations to calculate values of given variables. In terms of long answer questions, they again could ask you to write out a practical method or to analyze some data, but they may also in Physics Paper 1 ask you a 6-mark question, which is a calculation question where you may have to use multiple equations in order to get to the final answer. In these questions, it's important that you look at the information and the values they give you in the question and then strategically pick the equations that are going to get you to that answer. They'll also use describing, explain and evaluate command words. For example, they might ask you to describe the relationship between mass and weight. As the mass of something goes up, then its weight goes up, remembering weight is a force of gravity acting on something. They then might ask you to explain that, which would be that actually the more mass something has, the bigger its gravitational field strength, and therefore the stronger the force acting on it. And they might ask you to evaluate information about renewable and non-renewable energy resources. Again, you pick the pros and cons, make sure you read the question and give the detail about what it is they're actually asking you, and look at the evidence that they've given you. Again, understanding variables is important for Physics Paper 1, remembering that your independent variable is the one that you choose to change in the experiment. So for example, altering the length of a piece of wire in a resistance experiment, that would be your independent variable. You would choose those values, 10 centimeters, 20 centimeters, etc. The dependent variable in that instant, the thing that you are actually recording, would be resistance, but in order to gather that information you would need to calculate it, which means you would need to measure both current and potential difference. And then the control variables will be anything that could affect the resistance in that experiment, for example. So that could be the power rating on the power pack, that will be the diameter of the wire and the type of metal used in the wire. Again, Physics Paper 1 will have graphs in it, and it's important that you know how to read your axes and plot your own axes. So in this example, we've got 5 small squares being equal to 200 steps in 1,000 steps. So you would do 200 divided by 5, and that would give you 40. Therefore, each small square on this axis would be 40 steps in 1,000. In Physics Paper 1, there are a lot of equations that you need to remember. Now, you should have looked at that in your revision, so I'm not going to go over all of them now because it would take too much time. I will, however, show you how to rearrange an equation if you are given it. So, for example, we have power is equal to potential difference times current. If the subject of your equation, for example, here is power, is equal to two things multiplied by one another, in this case potential difference and current, then the two things that are multiplied by one another go in the base of your triangle and the subject of your equation goes in the top of the triangle. Now you have the triangle that you can use in order to make either of the other two values the subject of your equation just by covering them. So for example, if we needed to work out potential difference, we'd cover that and we're left with power over current. So potential difference is power divided by current. And if we were asked to make current the subject of the equation, we would cover current and we're left with power over potential difference. So current becomes power divided by potential difference. Units are also vital in physics paper 1. So here are some of the main units that you will be asked to use. You have current, which is in amps with a capital A. You have potential difference, which is measured in volts with a capital V. You have power, which is measured in watts with a capital W. You have resistance, which is measured in ohms, and that's the omega sign there. Then you have charge, which is measured in coulombs, which is a capital C. You have energy, which is measured in joules, a capital J, and then you have force that is measured in newtons, a capital N, and then temperature, which is in degrees Celsius. And some prefixes to remember when it comes to these units. If it is mega, it is 1,000,000 times greater, so a megawatt would be 1,000,000 watts. If it is kilo, then it's 1,000 times greater, so 1 kilowatt would be 1,000 watts. And milli is actually the opposite way, so milli is 1,000 times smaller, so 0.001 of whatever it is you've got, so 1 milliwatt would be 0.001 watts. And finally, while most of the maths you're going to be tested on in physics will be included in the calculations using equations that we've just looked at, they will again ask you to use significant figures. So here's an example, 2.356 kilograms being asked to one significant figure. So we know that 2 is the first significant figure. So we look at 3 and that is lower than 4. So we round down and that becomes 2 kilograms. They may ask you in density questions to calculate the volume of a sphere or the volume of a cylinder. To calculate the volume of a sphere, you need to do 4/3 times pi times r cubed, where r is radius. And remember that the radius of a circle is half the diameter. So if they give you the diameter in the question, you have to divide that by 2 to get the radius. And with a cylinder, you need to work out the volume by doing pi times r squared this time times the height. And remember to look out for diameter and divide it by 2 to get your radius. The last thing I want to mention are anomalies. So they may ask you to spot an anomaly, or they may give you a set of repeat results to calculate a mean from, and you need to be able to know that an anomalous result is one that is significantly different from the other repeats. So in the example I've given here, we've got repeat 1, 153, repeat 2, 102, and repeat 3, 155. Well, it's clear that repeat 2 is significantly different to repeats 1 and 3. So in this instance, that's our anomalous result, and we exclude that from our calculation. So to work out the mean for these values, we would do 153 plus 155 and take the sum of that calculation and divide it by 2, which gives us a mean value of 154.